I was so excited when God told me who my next message would be about because the woman we're talking about today isn't just someone in the Bible to me, she's personal. About 3 to 4 years ago, before I ever had my daughter, God told me that I would have a little girl, and He told me to name her Lydia. Now, I need y'all to understand something. I wasn't pregnant or trying. There was zero evidence that this was about to happen, and it didn't happen immediately after God spoke to me. But God spoke a name, and then things started happening that I couldn't ignore. After He spoke Lydia, I saw the name everywhere in bookstores, street signs, social media, business names. Even at Wesley's school, a little boy came up to me and said, Lydia's coming, and there was no Lydia that went to that Mother's Day Out program. It was everywhere. It was like no matter where I turned, God was reminding me I said what I said. But I also need you to know that it didn't happen as soon as God spoke to me. It took a few years, and in that season of waiting, God gave us a son. And I remember being so confused because I know what God spoke to me and even confirmed to me daily. But it was not the way I thought He would do it. Because let's be real, we tend to try to understand, give timelines, or think that this is exactly how what God spoke should happen for me. And when that goes off of our own plan, our faith gets shaken. God was really showing me this while writing this message, that we have got to stop trying to insert ourselves in God's plan. The moment we try to control how God is going to do something, we set ourselves up to question Him when it doesn't look like what we expected. We start saying things like, I thought it would happen this way. I thought it would happen by now. This doesn't look like what you promised. And now, without even realizing it, we're not doubting the promise, but we're doubting the process. I had already decided in my mind how I thought God was going to do it. And that was, well, God spoke to me a baby girl, so it's going to happen right now. But God wasn't working on my plan or timeline. He didn't need my advice, opinion, or help fulfilling a promise that He made. He only needed me to have faith. That's it. So in the season of waiting for Lydia, I had a choice. I could keep faithful and stop trying to figure it out, or I could get discouraged and lose my faith. I decided that I was going to believe God anyways. So I bought baby girl clothes, equipment, toys, bows, basically anything and everything for a girl I had. I even had her nursery done before I was ever pregnant with her. In Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6, it says, Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not on to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. And that's what I decided to do. Let go of the timeline that I created and just trust God. But here's the thing. When God told me Lydia, I didn't even know Lydia was in the Bible. I had never heard her story. I didn't know anything about her, and I didn't even know that she was a biblical figure. God gave me the name before He ever gave me the context. In Acts chapter 16, we meet Lydia through Paul. In Acts chapter 16, 13 verses 15 and 40, it says, And on the Sabbath we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayer has wont to be made, and we sat down and spake unto the women which resorted thither. And when a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple, which worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, that she attended unto the things which were spoken of Paul. And when she was baptized and her household, she besought us, saying, If ye have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us. And in verse 40 it says, And when they went out into the prison and entered into the house of Lydia, and when they had seen the brethren, they comforted them and departed. Now, this is the only direct mention of Lydia in the entire Bible. However, we're going to see just how much of a powerhouse she was for God. So we learn in the scriptures that she was a businesswoman. She sold purple. And we learned in the first message series that purple is not a casual color. In the Bible, it means wealth and influence. But more importantly, she was a believer. She was seeking God, and she was in the right place. However, we see in verse 14 that the Lord opened her heart. We can sit in this room all day and hear the word of God, but if our hearts aren't open to receive the word of God, it's not going to matter. You can hear God all day, but if your heart is not open to receive what He is telling you, you are not going to respond. You will sit in idleness, which we also learned is a decision that we make whether we want to admit it or not, and that's disobedient to God. When God is telling us something, whether it's to do something, say something, not to do something, I don't care what it is, and we think by not responding that we have found a loophole or an excuse, it's still disobedience to God. Even though you haven't outright told God no, your actions have. No response is a response. Some of us have gotten so comfortable sitting on what God told us to do that we have actually convinced ourselves that because we have not blatantly said no, we are still being obedient. When God tells you to move, to speak, to step out, to trust Him, and you choose to sit still, that's not being neutral. That's not receiving what He told you. That's not processing. Whatever excuse you've come up with, it's disobedience. God tells us something, and we will walk around saying, "Oh, I'm just waiting on God," or, "Well, I don't know if God actually told me that," or, "I'm just waiting for confirmation from God before I start." And in our idleness, these lies make so much sense to us because we want more information on what He told us, because we want to decide if it's what we had in mind or not. But hearing them now, do we see the lack of trust, the lack of obedience, the lack of faith? We know that God told us to do something, and we will follow up with, "I'm just waiting on confirmation before I move forward." What more confirmation do we need when He told us the first time? When God opened Lydia's heart, she didn't sit in idleness. She just responded. And today we're going to look at just how incredible the response was. But before we get into the impact of God opening her heart, let's ask these questions. What would have happened if Lydia just sat there? Would her household have been saved? Would her house have become a place for believers? Would her impact even exist? Now, I'm going to ask you something. What is on the other side of your response that hasn't happened yet because you're still sitting? You are not waiting on God. God is waiting on you. You are not doubting God speaking to you. You're wanting more information to make your own plan and timeline. You're not waiting on confirmation. God has already told you, and at this point, it's probably been more than once. You're deciding if it's what you think is best. But Lydia didn't do that. She didn't wait. She didn't overthink or ask for 5 more confirmations. She responded. She trusted God and responded. In verse 15, we see that not only did she get baptized, but her household did as well. Lydia's response didn't just affect her, it affected everything connected to her. When Lydia said yes to God, her family encountered God. When Lydia responded, her household was transformed. And some of you are wondering why things haven't shifted around you, but you haven't even responded to what God told you to do. Now, this is my favorite part of her story because it's so encouraging to women in ministry. In verse 15, she tells Paul, "Come stay with me." She opens her house for ministry. Her house became a place where believers gathered. Her response to God created space for ministry. What started as a simple yes became a place of impact and a huge piece of the New Testament. Are you ready to dive into what her response produced for the kingdom? Because her house didn't just become a place to stay, it became the foundation of the early church. In verse 40, it said, "And when Paul and Silas were released from prison, they went back to Lydia's house, and the believers were there." Which means her house became the meeting place for the early church. And the early church grew into what we now know as the Church of Philippi. And later, Paul wrote a letter to that same church, the book of Philippians. Let's talk a little bit about the book of Philippians. This was a letter to the church that Paul writes while in prison, yet it is one of the most joyful books in the Bible. Philippians is a letter about joy in all circumstances, generosity, faithfulness, and partnership in the gospel. The spirit of that church looked like the woman who made room for it. We saw where Lydia gave, supported, and created space. We see in the book of Philippians that the church gave, supported, and partnered. That's the same DNA. Because what opened and carried into her house multiplied into a whole community of believers. Here's how this matters for women in ministry. Because Lydia didn't preach a sermon, she opened her home. She didn't have a title, but she built something that impacted generations. You might think your obedience is small, or you don't think that what you've been putting off is a big deal, but it very could well build something that outlives you. You have no idea what God is trying to build through your yes. And the more that you sit around in idleness and disobedience, the more blessings you're blocking, and the more time you're taking away from God, from the calling that God has placed on your life. Let me ask you this. Why are we so afraid to say yes to God? We read the Bible and we know who God is. We read where he has delivered his followers every single time. We sing worship music about how amazing God is and how much he loves us and we love him. We come to church and listen to messages and think, wow, this message was for me. There's no way that anyone could have known I was going through this. Yet when God tells us to step into something, we panic and say, I don't know, or just flat out no. God has never not taken care of his people, so why do we think that we are the first ones that he will abandon? We have an entire Bible with 66 books showing us time and time again his love for us. We have a Bible that tells us fear not 365 times, every single day of the year. Does that alone not show us something? Why are we so combative and hesitant when he tells us something? We have no excuses. How are we supposed to lead others to him when we can't even have enough faith to step into what he told us to do? In Matthew chapter 17:20, it says, And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief, for verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of a mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible to you. We've seen how small a mustard seed is, and we can't even give God that much faith to do what he told us to do. That's offensive, embarrassing, and we should be ashamed. The question is not, did God actually speak? Do I need more confirmation? What is the whole picture? The question is, what did you do with what he said? Let me ask again. What did you do with what he said? I'm not asking what you felt, not what you thought, not your opinion, not what you planned, but what did you actually do with what God told you? Because some of us heard God and delayed, heard God and overthought, heard God and asked 10 more times for confirmations, or heard God and did absolutely nothing. Yet we've dressed up disobedience and called it wisdom. And I'm not talking about your neighbor, your friend, your family member, a church member. I'm talking about you. What has God been laying on your heart that you keep putting on the back burner? What has God been telling you to do that you keep delaying? What has God shown you what step has God shown you that you refuse to take? Lydia could have done the exact same thing. She could have said, I need more time. I'm not ready. I want more information. She could have asked for 10 more confirmations. She could have asked if God really told her that, or she could have simply said no. But she didn't. She just responded. And her response changed everything. Her yes didn't just impact her, it impacted her house, her city, the early church, women in ministry, and we are still talking about her today. And that's all because that she didn't sit in idleness when God told her something. And I need you to hear me when I tell you this. Delayed disobedience is still disobedience. Half disobedience is still disobedience. Selective disobedience is still disobedience. Stop calling disobedience wisdom to make yourself feel better about not following God. In James chapter 1, verse 22, it says, But ye doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. And let's be real. You are not confused. You are not waiting. You are not lacking clarity. You know what God said and you didn't do it. That's disobedience. No ifs, ands, buts about it. No excuses. The bottom line is it's disobedience. And the truth is, some of us don't like hearing that because it confronts us, exposes us, and strips every excuse we've been hiding behind. Because as long as we say, I'm waiting on confirmation, I'm making sure God really said that, I'm waiting on more information, we don't have to admit that we are disobeying. But how can we expect to grow when we are running from what God already told us? We cannot walk into what God told us to do while ignoring what he told us to do. We cannot move forward in purpose if we won't obey what God has already said. We cannot ask God for more while ignoring what he already said. Why would God give us another instruction when we haven't even obeyed the last one? Luke chapter 16, verse 10 says, He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. We really have the audacity to ask God for the big, but he's watching what we do with the small. Some of you, God told you to start and you didn't. God told you to stop and you didn't. God told you to leave and you didn't. God told you to speak and you stayed silent. And then you turn around asking God why nothing is changing, why nothing is being blessed, why nothing is shifting around you. The small instructions matter. The quiet nudge matters. The thing that nobody sees matters. I don't care how big or small something seems to you. If God told you to do it, it matters. For example, if God tells you after every service, walk around and make sure that every pen holder has a pen, and you think, no, that's not important. Well, for one, you're telling God that you know better than him. For two, you think you're too good for what we think is a small task. And three, you're being disobedient. But if you can't even place a pen where it goes, what in the world makes you think that God would give you anything bigger than that? Let me physically show you something. That right there, that small instruction that God is telling you to do, that you are disobeying, you will have to answer to God for that. You are holding up what's on the other side of your yes. You are affecting everything connected to you. And let me tell you something. I'm not about to stand before God explaining why I couldn't place a pen in a holder. I'm not about to hold up my blessings and calling over my life over something that simple. And I'm definitely not about to miss the opportunity for someone to receive what they needed because I decided it wasn't important enough. Are you seeing where I'm going with this, or are you still trying to decide if your disobedience is justified? But that's the part that we don't like. We want the big assignments, the big platforms, the big impact, but we ignore the small instructions that qualify us for it and then wonder why nothing is moving. Let's be real. Some of you don't obey the small things because you think it's beneath you, but nothing that God asks you to do is beneath you. If Jesus, the Son of God, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, got on his knees and washed feet, what makes us think that we're too big for what we think is small obedience? Who are we to pick and choose what we obey? So let's really talk about it. Is it disobedience or is it pride? Is it confusion or is it control? Is it waiting or is it fear? Or is it that you heard God and decided to just not respond? And hear me when I say this is not to condemn you. This is your wake-up call. God is not exposing this today to shame us. He's exposing it because there is so much more for you on the other side of your obedience. Conviction is not rejection, it is an invitation to come higher, an invitation to trust him deeper, an invitation to stop delaying what he already told you to do. God is still speaking, God is still calling, God is still placing things on your heart, and just like he spoke a name to me, he has spoke something to you. Because some of you are waiting on clarity when God is waiting on obedience. Some of you are asking for confirmation when God already confirmed it the first time. Some of you are asking for the whole plan when God told you to take the first step. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 4 says, whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. If you keep waiting on what you think are the perfect conditions, you will never move. In Luke chapter 10 verse 14, it says, whoever is faithful in little will also be faithful in much. So if you won't obey God in the small thing, what makes you think you're ready for the big thing? Some of you are praying for platforms, but ignoring instructions. Some of you are praying for influence, but avoiding obedience. Some of you are praying for increase, but resisting what God told you to do last time. And today God is saying, why would I trust you with more if you won't obey me with what I've already given you? So let's go back to Lydia for a moment. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't have a title. She didn't have a platform, but she did have a yes. And a yes opened her home, changed her house, created space, and helped build the early church. All of that because she just said yes. Listen to me when I say this. You have no idea what's on the other side of your yes. You have no idea who's connected to your obedience. You have no idea what God is trying to build through you, and you will never see it if you stay sitting, delaying, calling disobedience wisdom. So today, let this be your moment. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready, right now. God is not asking you for perfection. He is not asking you to have it all figured out. He is simply asking for a yes. Here's the question. What has God told you to do that you haven't done? What instruction have you been sitting on? What step have you been avoiding? Because the kingdom is waiting on your response. Today, I'm asking you to be obedient to what God has already told you to do. You have a choice this morning. You can walk out of this room the same, or you can walk out of this room obedient. You can walk out of this room making excuses, or you can walk out of this room and finally say yes. Because at the end of the day, you don't need more confirmation, information, or clarification. You need more obedience. I'm going to say this one more time. God is still speaking and God is still calling. The only question left is, will you respond?
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah,